That was an insightful session on hyper-personalization and how brands are rethinking customer engagement in real time. It clearly showed that delivering relevance at scale is no longer optional. It is becoming the foundation of modern customer experience. But as customer expectations evolve, so does the way they discover information. Search itself is undergoing a major shift. We are moving from a world of reactive SEO built on keywords and rankings to a far more dynamic, intent driven ecosystem powered by AI. Today, users are not just searching, they're asking questions, expecting direct answers, contextual understanding, and conversational interactions. And the scale of this shift is massive. According to McKinsey and Company, nearly half of the consumers are already using AI powered search today. And this trend is expected to influence up to $750 billion in revenue by 2028. So, how do you stay visible when search engines are no longer just indexing content, but interpreting intent? How do you create strategies that don't just react to queries, but anticipate them? To explore that, I'm handing it over to Shweta Sharma, a seasoned marketing professional with over a decade of experience in marketing, recognized for leading high impact marketing initiatives across web development, e commerce, and Microsoft services. She'll guide today's panel on From Reactive to Predictive, rebuilding your SEO strategy for AI search. Over to you, Shweta.
Thank you, Jaskaran. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm Shweta Sharma, and I'm delighted to continue the conversation with you today. In our previous session on hyper personalization at scale, we explored how AI and data are helping brands move beyond broad messaging towards more individualized, context aware customer experiences. In this session, we take that evolution one step further into how discovery itself is changing in the age of AI. Our topic today is From Reactive to Predictive, rebuilding your SEO strategy for AI search. The shift is bigger than it sounds. Search is no longer just about ranking on pages. It's about how AI systems interpret intent, generate answers, and shape what users even get to see. And to unpack this, we are joined by two incredible leaders who are actively shaping this space. First, we have Helen Yu, the founder and CEO of Tigan Advisory Corp and host of CXO Spice, as well as a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, a seasoned board director and a strategic advisor. She brings deep expertise across AI, cybersecurity, go-to-market strategy, and customer experience. She's recognized among the top 50 women in tech, top 30 AI leaders in cybersecurity, and top six cybersecurity leaders of 2025. Helen is a sought-after global speaker at forums including Cyber Risk Collaborative, Dell Technologies, FinTech Summit, and many more. Joining Helen today is Scott Wilder. He is the global head of digital self-serve and scale at LastPass, where he leads strategies that leverage digital channels to drive both pre and post sales growth. With a career spanning some of the most influential names in the tech and edtech, including Google, Intuit, Clary, HubSpot, Adobe, Coursera, Udacity, Scott brings deep expertise in building scalable digital experiences that meet customers where they are. Welcome, Helen and Scott. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us today. Looking forward to the discussion.
Absolutely.
Me too.
Yes. Let's dive right in. Scott, I would love to start with you. What does visibility mean today as search results continue to evolve?
You know, for decades, visibility meant, how you handle your keywords, how you rank, etc. Now, ranking is still important, and it's funny that Google just announced on the 15th this month that they consider AEO and GEO part of SEO in terms of the company. So we can talk more about that later. But in terms of visibility, it also means how you appear on Google AI overviews how you appear on LLMs such as ChatGPT and Claude and whatever other ones you use. And then also brand recognition, and how brand recognition is not just on the properties that you own, but also on the properties that are out there on the internet. So, when you think about PR, for example, it's really, and PR evolved to digital PR, and now you find a lot of PR groups really focused on how can I get more visibility on these different sites. It also is in terms of how you're cited on other community platforms such as Reddit, and LinkedIn is increasingly becoming important. And so it's really those four elements. I'd start with that. Traditional ranking, LLMs, Google AI overviews, and then brand recognition. And I think it's also important to, think about authority in terms of AI signals. So, historically we said we need to bring everybody into our house. We need to bring everybody to our site. But right now, as I think a lot of us do, when we're trying to figure out what to buy for our homes or what problems we're trying to solve at work, we're going to the LLMs to get answers. And that's the LLMs are providing enough information that users don't necessarily have to end up going to the site.
Yes, true. Helen, please share your thoughts.
Yeah, it's such a delight to be here with both of you. I used to speak to Scott in the hallway, so glad that we're reconnected here. I echo what Scott said. I actually saw this shift firsthand. We recently helped a customer scaling and doubling their ARR in the past two and a half years. So one of the things we did was to build that authoritative, deeply structured content around customer pain points, right? And then that really got them pulled into AI conversations, regardless of if someone clicked. Visibility to me now is really influence, right? If you're not really being mentioned by AI or anywhere, you basically don't have the influence, and no one would be buying anything from you if you don't have a market influence there. That's really important. To understanding the shift is super important, essential for your growth. And then the question I would ask used to be like, what are you ranking, for, right? It really matters. But now is, are you showing up in the answer is what we ask when we first interact with our customers.
True, that's true. And I must say that's a great way to frame it and start the conversation. Visibility is no longer about being number one on a list of blue links now anymore. It's more about being the cited source on AI generated synthesis. Thank you so much for those perspectives, both of you. I'll stay with you for the next one also, Scott. In a zero-click world, how are AI generated responses influencing how users discover and engage with content?
Well, it's funny, we're talking about how we used to work together at Marketo, and we used to talk about how important the funnel was. And we'd sit in a room and break out the funnel into different parts, awareness, we're doing awareness here, we're doing, breaking out each step. But really what's happening is the funnel's becoming condensed, and the playing field for the funnel is the percentage of it is more and more is happening. More and more of it is taking place on the LLMs itself, right? So when you think about the whole user experience, you really need to say, okay, increasingly more of it's being weighted towards what happens on these LLMs. And then what happens on the LLMs, 60% of on Google, for example, there's no search, there's no click going through. So it's funny, even today when I, advise companies, a lot of times they're saying, well, we need click-throughs. But the reality is that, 60% of all Google searches end up with no click-throughs. And in AI mode, Google AI mode, 93% of those queries generate 0 external clicks as well. So I think you really need to think about, in my world, the 3 C's in terms of how you handle 0 clicks. And the 3 C's are the content you are producing. And we'll get a little bit into later on about how to structure the content. So the content you are producing, is it being picked up by these these LLMs? 2 is citations. And so I talked a little bit about earlier in terms of where you're being cited, how are you being cited, right? So somebody will go to ChatGPT, they'll search on a how do I do this? And then there'll be a list of different citations. And so you want to make sure you're part of those citations. And then the last one, community. So you have content, citations, and community. And on the community side, someone who's invested a lot of their career in community, it's really important. I think everybody knows about Reddit. There's been lots of articles about Reddit and how that's important in the space. Obviously, LinkedIn is becoming more important, but you also, as you use some of these tools, look to see where else you're cited, right? So again, don't focus so much on how many clicks you're getting to your site. The other thing I would say too is, because when I make a statement like that, the question becomes up, well, what about conversion? And percent-wise, the conversion rates are higher when somebody's getting information from the LLMs because the information is more precise, right? So when people come to our site, a lot of times there's multiple places to go for information, right? You can go to the support site, you can go to the community, you can go to a blog, but what the LLMs are doing is consolidating all that in one place, so the customer's getting, or the prospect is getting their information in a nice packaged up format. And that is going to give them more confidence about whether or not, they can actually buy or find what they want on your own site.
Yes, absolutely. If I talk about my experience, not very long ago, we used to rely on our gated white paper, our gated assets to capture leads. We track every download now, but now we're seeing prospects show up on a discovery call already 70% through the funnel because they've spent an hour chatting with the LLM about our methodology, about our practices. They're not checking our PDFs anymore. They're just consuming our expertise through the AI lens now. I think the top of the funnel has moved a bit into the AI prompt. What do you have to say about that, Helen?
Well, I really like the 3C framework Scott laid out, but when I serve as an independent director at Kinfolks. It's a integrated AI marketing company. So when we provide oversight to the launch of OG.ai last year, it's an AI tool that trained across 100 plus content categories. One of the findings was how early in the discovery journey users really were making decisions, right? The brands really whose content was structured to be consumed by AI tools were getting surfaced and referenced by OG.ai recommendations even before the user ever did a traditional search. So, to Scott's earlier point, that becomes a new top of the funnel. So it's really important for marketers to understand the new way, how everything really tied together with the availability of AI today. So it's super critical.
True that, Helen. I'll continue my next question with you only, Helen. I'd like you to answer, how can marketers stay on top of their marketing goals with the rise of search generative experience and large language models?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. The organic goal hasn't really changed, right? Earning trust and driving qualified interest have remained the same. But the playbook, how to get there, has really changed. So there are three things I'll tell any marketer right now, right, to focus on. Number one is to audit your content for answer readiness. Can an LLM extract a clear, citable answer from it? For example, I even go to Grok, I Grok myself, right? Tell me something about me or my company. You can learn so much from that exercise. A cybersecurity vendor can rank for identity governance, but still really lose attention if an AI summary already explains the category and names competitors above the link. So you really, in that case, the brand that gets cited in the answer gains influence before the click ever happens. Number two is shift toward question-based queries and informational intent. A supply chain software company could use AI to surface questions like, how do I reduce supplier risk during disruption? And then build a guide and checklist and then executive summary around the question. So that's how you produce content. You don't just go produce content and then not knowing if that would have hit, the answer or query, and then so hit the intent. And then third is to double down on proprietary point of view. LLMs summarize consensus, but they can't replicate your unique data and expertise, right? That's your moat. So I oftentimes help companies build content earn authority at every stage of customer journey. That same principle actually applies now. You have to have the content, generate content that answers the why behind a search. And that's really how you get referenced by AI. So any type of content with thought leadership, or for example, comparison pages or FAQ pages with original research or any executive thought leadership point of view, is much more likely to be surfaced by AI than the generic blog. Even though the blog may generate more traffic, that does not mean you will be really find or move you through the funnel.
Yes, that's a valuable perspective. Scott, would you like to add something here?
Yeah, I mean, so there's obviously ChatGPT out there, but still a lot of these sites are focusing on what Google has historically, over the last few years, talked about EEAT, right? So you have experience, you have expertise, authority, and trust. And so moving, as Helen pointed out, moving from traffic to, authority or trust, or so focusing on those four different areas. And then I think on top of that is thinking about, what are the levers or what's the data you want to move under each one of those. And so some examples are, looking at the number of citations that you have on each one of them, looking at the brand mentions under each one. What I would say is figure out which one or two you want to focus on the most. And maybe it's based on, I want to focus on ChatGPT or Google AI overviews first, and then look at the data I just mentioned under each one of those. And then the other thing I would say is if you use a tool, use multiple tools, because what I've found out as well is tools show different results, right? I think all in this AI world, wasn't directly answering your question here, but I think don't take one source as the source of truth, right? So if you want to see how you're cited, look at Google AI overviews and compare it to ChatGPT, or compare it to Claude. So I would do that, those sorts of activities. And I think, we'll get into maybe some tactics, but then there's the tactics that you can do to make sure that you are cited on these places. So.
Yes, that's such a valuable perspective, especially the landscape keeps evolving so quickly. You so rightly said that every engine, every tool works differently and answers differently. So the goal now is answer readiness. Marketers must pivot from keyword lists now to question-based queries and the how-tos, as Helen suggested. Scott, staying with you and building on what you just shared with us, how can marketers adapt to an AI-driven discovery pattern? I know it's a bit related to what you just said. We would want you to elaborate more on this.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon right now. So, companies that I've talked to, a lot of them are focusing on words like best or top, top of. It's really funny. I just we originally we just did an RFP, and it was really interesting because I was looking at the result. I was comparing the companies using Claude and using ChatGPT, and I noticed that one company ranked higher than another company, and I kind of dug into why it was. And there's some keyword stuffing going on even in the AI world. So what I noticed was competitor company A had the term best and best in class appear 300 times on their site. Company B had it 100 times. Company A was recommended more. So, I think marketers need to really be to dig into the details about what's influencing how they show up. But to really answer your question head on, you need to think about your answer first approach to things and how you're structuring your content. How-to content is very important, as you pointed out. So how do you structure that? And you can get pretty tactical. If you're working on a blog, for example, and you want that to be cited, it's really important. The title obviously is important, but right up front, at the top of the article, it's important to say, this is what the topic is about. And it's amazing how many blogs you can look at where they don't do that. Schema data is really important. FAQ data is really important. So how you're structuring your content really has a big impact on things. And then, And I think as well, we talked about, and go back to the 3 C's, right? So that was the content part. And the citations are really important. So how do you establish authority, reaching out to, if you're in the tech space, for example, and you're selling Apple products, is think about which publications people are going to learn about Apple products, and then really reach out to those folks to see how you can get cited on those sites. Community perspective, there's a lot you can do on Reddit, for example. I talked about LinkedIn earlier. Yeah, I think I'm just trying to think what else here. So those are kind of like the big things, content, community, citations. I'll keep going back to that. And then there's specific tactics under each one of those.
Yes, makes sense. So adapting our strategy with these tactics is just as important as creating content. What do you say, Helen?
I was going to add.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's funny because we talk a lot about how keywords. There's a lot of comments out there about keywords are not. We're not in a keyword world. We are in a keyword world. It's just different. Like historically, we tried to stuff keywords and use the same keyword over and over. But just like a good content writer would do when they're approaching their content, is think about your content pillars and the words you're using in terms of those content pillars. Think about, you're looking at the customer intent. And so how is the customer talking? What kind of language does the customer use? We spend a lot of times really analyzing analyzing cases, analyzing community chats, analyzing chat transcripts to understand the language that people use when they're asking a question. And it's really important that the content you put together plays back the same language to them.
Yeah, in my fractional CXO work across AI and cybersecurity governance, I learned that the company is really adapting faster are the ones using AI in their research process, right? Not just for content production. And for example, we're running AI queries to map the questions their buyers are asking, right? We can do a query asking what are the key questions buyers are asking and building content to fill those gaps before the traffic signal shows up in the analytics. That really shift from reactive to predictive right there, right? Think about it.
Absolutely. Finding those white spaces with the help of AI, I think will help us to do it here. As marketers, many of us grew up optimizing for clicks, rankings, and enters. But AI search is forcing us to rethink whether traditional SEO metrics still tell the full story. And that brings us to another vital aspect of measurement. Helen, I would like to ask you, what signals and metrics can be used to access content impact beyond clicks?
As a matter of fact, I'm so glad the clicks are not just the only metrics anymore, because they were really proxy metric to begin with. We just didn't have a better ones before. Now we finally do, right? The metrics I had to build a dashboard around today. I agree with Scott earlier, AI citation, but not only the citation, but how frequently, the frequency of the citation, how often your content is surfaced in AI in multiple channels, not just one place, right? And then branded search lift after AI exposure. For example, if there's a content depth score, right? And whether visitors consume enough to signal real intent, right? What kind of content are being consumed by the buyers right before their purchasing decision, or pipeline influence at an earlier funnel stages. You have to understand your sales funnel, obviously, and then make sure you have a tool that tracks every single stage and how the effectiveness of your content, and share a voice in your categories, AI answers versus competitors. So those really paint a far more honest picture than click-through rate ever did. Not to say click-through does not do anything. It's still a good indicator, but you can't just rely on a single source of truth anymore. And then the other thing I would say, we had, I recently worked with a customer, we had to justify organic investment with metrics that tied to revenue. So what we do, we build leading indicators around pipeline influence, The entire funnel, what content was the customer consuming right before they were converted. That discipline is what makes today's AI visibility metrics so valuable. And then as we learn along the way, one thing you have to know, these metrics move, right? They're not going to be static. So you have to make sure you understand the real-time impact and then make adjustment, and then making sure you have leading indicators of pipeline, not just lagging signals of traffic. A brand, for example, may see fewer clicks from search, but if branded search volume rises, right, demo requests increase, and AI answers repeatedly references content, the business impact is real. It's just happening earlier in the journey. So as a marketer, you got to understand the intricacy of all these indicators, not just focus on the old metrics anymore. And so that's very important for marketers to really have a mindset shift and then to adapt to the new reality.
Yes, it is really a mindset shift. If our traffic is down, but our branded search and high intent queries are up, I think AI is doing the filtering for us. We are getting fewer tourists, but more buyers. So I totally agree with you there, Helen. Scott, would you like to jump in here?
Yeah, no, Helen brought up some really good points, especially around frequency. Some of the things we're doing too is we're looking at trends. And so basically how we're being cited over time based on some activities we're taking or activities in the marketplace, right? So we're in the security, privacy, password space, right? So we can see, if, there's an event that happens or something, then how are customers, if there's an event happening, how are publications writing about privacy and security, and how does that impact how we're being cited? So I think it's really important to look at the trends. The second thing is, a year ago, we wouldn't be having this discussion. So we have a great content team here who is increasingly working on making the content more AI discoverable. So every time they update an article or a blog, we're looking at the impact across all of these different LLMs, as well as Google AI overviews. So we know, we made these changes, we made XYZ changes, and so what is the impact on ChatGPT, et cetera? And then I think the last thing too is it's a little tricky, but yeah, looking at impact on revenue. There's some things we can do there. We're looking at, Google Analytics could probably help with this, but just looking at traffic from those sites and looking at the conversion rate based on that. And as I indicated earlier, conversion rate is going to be higher than if it's just, I'll call it a traditional organic search results. On a tactical level, we talked about citation rate. There's impressions, things like that. I'm not into the sentiment as much as most people, but sentiment is also something to look at as well. So I think the key takeaways are, don't rely on one source of truth, right? Have multiple dashboards and compare it. 2 is look at frequency and recency. And 3 is really look at the marketplace or what you're doing, what activities can influence how you're being cited, what can influence how LLMs are driving traffic to your site.
Yes, thank you so much, Scott. And a final question for you, Helen. As search evolves with AI, what should marketers stop doing and start doing to measure success and visibility effectively?
Well, I would say stop chasing keyword volume, right? Keywords are still important, but you shouldn't chase the volume, but you stop treating position 0 as if it's still 2022 and stop measuring all the organic traffic as equal. I would start mapping contents to the why behind every search, understand the job the user is trying to get done, especially your target ideal customer profile, the buyer, your potential buyers, right? And start tracking presence in AI generated answers, not just tracking about you, tracking about your target buyers and tracking about your competitors. Really understand, where you are at in the market. and start building that content with more defensible point of view. When I say defensible point of view, it is really your unique value. Oftentimes, I mean, our success, customer success stories and that's our unique value, and then the rich data we own, right? Those are unique value. And then your thought leadership, obviously also your defensible point of view. And then because that's what LLM surface once, and synthesizing answers, and then use AI in your research process, not just for content, but really when you do research to figure out things out, finding questions your audience is asking, no one has answered yet, right? That's white space we're talking about. Very important. As a board director focused on AI and cyber governance, the through line I see everywhere is that organizations pulling ahead of treating AI search the same way I've advised treating any digital disruption. And then you got to really stay ahead of the signal. Don't wait for the data to confirm you already lost the ground. For example, a team that tracks only keyword rank may miss the fact that as the content is being cited in AI summaries, but repurposed in answer engines rather than influence the buyers before click. Right? That's really why visibility is so important. It needs a much broader measurement model. We mentioned earlier about the citation frequency, how often your content is surfaced in AI responses, and not just you, your competitors too, right? Branded search lift after AI exposure, content depth score, and whether visitors consume enough to signal a real intent, or your pipeline influence at earlier funnel stages, the share of voice, especially share of voice in thought leadership in the categories you're in, and then how you are comparing to your competitors. These would paint a far more honest picture for you than click-through rate ever did.
Yes, true. Scott, would you like to add in here?
Yeah, I think in terms of Helen hit most of those key points, but one is, it's not just your site. Historically, we've looked at how we're doing in terms of our site. You really need to look at what you can do to build a greater presence on these other sites as well. Think about, break it down, look at the ecosystem, right? So you have, I'm going to just say the tech space because that's where I spend most of my time. But, when I consult the companies, I look at, who are the players in terms of information in the tech space? Is it like PC Magazine, whatever, TechCrunch, et cetera? Then who are providing reviews, G2, et cetera, although G2 is buying up everybody. So maybe it's just G2. So you're really looking at that whole ecosystem. I think in terms of starting to do is in companies, and the good news, bad news is I've been in a lot of big companies. Good news because I've been in big companies. The bad news is I moved around a lot. But one of the things is in most of these companies, the content creators are in different silos. So you really need to say, okay, who's creating content in the company, and really get them in the same room or Zoom room at least once a week, right? You don't want to cannibalize each other. You want to learn from each other. The next thing is to really do ongoing content audits. And a lot of that you can automate, right? So you can build a Claude skill that really says, take those 3 C's again and just say, how am I doing across these 3? And that's what I have. Every day I have my daily briefing. It tells me how our content is doing, what we're producing, how we're, I'm basically scoring ourselves in terms of how we're cited, and then scoring ourselves in terms of community. And then also, if you're using AI to build the content that you're using, make sure that you're taking the data I just mentioned, and training the model, so to speak, so that your content becomes more optimized. So it's easier to optimize the content that you're creating.
Well said, and thank you so much. I've taken a note of all those points. I'm sure you'll use them going ahead. We still have a couple of minutes left. I have a couple of audience questions I would like to take with both of you. So my first question is, many brands are worried about losing direct website traffic due to AI generated answers. How should organizations rethink content value and audience engagement in response to this shift?
Yeah, I think, we talked about it earlier, is don't just look at traffic. Don't look at traffic, and look beyond your own home, so to speak, right? So you want to look at the citations that are out there, and you can break it down to, I talked about the ecosystem, the different platforms, and seeing how you're being cited again, on those platforms. You can also see how you're doing vis-a-vis your competitors, right? So everything I've said today, what I didn't say was that, when we look at how we're cited, or we're looking at how we're doing on Reddit, compare yourselves to competitors as well. And if you set it up properly, you can also see if that content is driving people to, what's the transaction that you want to drive people to? Is it like taking them to your own community site? Is it taking them to the shop cart? Is it getting them to buy? So again, look beyond your own site and just take that model and say, okay, how can I be more visible in those places? And then you can, like I mentioned, Google Analytics or whatever you want to use, is look at traffic from citations. But again, it's not about traffic, right? But your CEO is probably going to say, where is the traffic? So you have to really educate your senior folks in the company that it's a different discussion.
Yeah, I would just ask a simple question, right? How are you showing up in the LLM answer, AI search? And then you start from there, everything else will come into place.
Well put across. Thank you so much, Helen and Scott, for sharing such thoughtful perspectives and some real-world insights. The discussion has been incredibly valuable today. As we close today's discussion, one thing is very clear. SEO is no longer just about rankings. It's about relevance, authority, and whether AI systems choose your brand as the answer. For marketers, this shift means shifting from reactive optimizations to predictive content, strategy building structured, answer-ready, insight-led content that AI engines can trust, extract, and reference. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and being a part of this conversation. And we hope we walk away with fresh ideas and a new lens. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a highly engaging and forward-looking discussion. Thank you to our panel for sharing such valuable perspectives on how SEO is evolving in the age of AI and what it takes to build predictive, intent-driven insights. A key takeaway from this session is that search today is centered on relevance, context, and timing. Success comes from understanding user intent, creating meaningful content, and showing up with the right answers at the right moment. We hope this session offered you a clear direction and actionable ideas to strengthen your SEO strategy for an AI-driven landscape. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Our next discussion.